this one. Why? 'Cause this is a review about a movie that features cross-dressing. The kids on Twitter think they invented cross-dressing, but that's not true. Kinda like most of what they believe. See, cross-dressing has been around for a long time in entertainment, way before Ezra Miller. For centuries, the actors in Asian theater were usually men. Men played all the parts, including female parts. And there was the legend of Mulan, of course. Her dad was too ill to go to war, so she dressed as a man to fight in her father's place. Cross-dressing has been around a long time in the movies as well. There was Katharine Hepburn and Sylvia Scarlett. But it goes both ways, like Old Mother Riley, a popular female character, played by comedian Arthur Lucan for over 40 years. And there was Jack Lemmon in Some Like It Hot, and of course, Uncle Milty, Milton Berle, who regularly appeared in women's clothing on his show. There was Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie, and there was Mrs. Doubtfire too. Most of these actors were comedians, and they knew there was nothing funnier than a man in a dress. And how about kung fu movies? Oftentimes they'd have a woman in disguise pretending to be a man. Although, gotta say, they never look convincing as the gender they're pretending to be. It's totally obvious. Just like with cross-dressers in real life. Oh, anyway, let's take a look at this movie. We're talking about Beverly of Graustark from 1926, starring Marion Davies and Creighton Hale. Our story goes like this. American girl Beverly Calhoun is the cousin of Oscar, who is in line to inherit the throne of the Kingdom of Graustark. In Graustark is a no-goodnik, this government minister, who wants to seize the throne for himself, so he arranges an accident to befall the prince on his way to the kingdom before he can claim his birthright. But on the way, the prince conks his head while skiing, and this leads to a crisis. If Oscar doesn't show up in Graustark at the appointed hour, he loses the throne. So Beverly and this advisor guy here, they cook up a plan for Beverly to disguise herself as Oscar and take his place until he can recover. And that leads to, you guessed it, cross-dressing. Along the way, the bad guy keeps trying to bump off our heroine, and she meets up with a handsome dude who saves her life. He becomes her bodyguard, and she falls in love with him, but he thinks she's a he. Comedy ensues. Will Beverly be found out? Will justice prevail in the Kingdom of Graustark? And what of love? A lot of the comedy in this movie derived from Marion being placed in situations where she might need to change clothes or take a bath or whatever in front of servants or other people, and doing so would reveal she's a chick. This is pretty standard stuff today, like with Mulan or comedies like Just One of the Guys and stuff like that, but in 1926 it was still a fairly new gag. In our cast, we have the great Marion Davies. Yep, she was the one who married newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst and became associated with an unflattering character in Citizen Kane, Charles Foster Kane's second wife, who was an untalented opera singer. Orson Welles kind of felt bad about that portrayal after the fact. In reality, Davies was super nice, a pretty good comedic actress, and was very successful. She gave up acting in 1937 and devoted herself to philanthropy. The haircut she sports in Beverly of Graustark became a fashion statement. See, at the time, most women had really long hair they had to do up. Then came the 1920s, and a shorter hairstyle, the so-called bobbed hairdo of the flappers, became all the rage. Colleen Moore popularized the look through her films, and Louise Brooks famously sported the new shorter hairstyle as well. Colleen got there first, though. And Marion's haircut from Beverly of Graustark was known as the Beverly Bob, and it became a trend. And that is a measure of the popularity of Marion Davies. Anotnio Moreno plays the love interest. Interesting guy. He was one of the screen's first Latin lovers, even before Valentino. He co-starred with Clara Bow in It, one of her most famous films. She was the It girl, remember. And when sound came in, his thick Spanish accent kind of held him back, so he turned to directing and had great success in Mexican film. Later, he returned to the screen to play character parts. He appears in The Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Searchers. We also have Creighton Hale. Now there's a name for you. Hale was also a big star in his day. He was in the classic Way Down East and Orphans of the Storm and The Cat and the Canary. He also didn't do well in talkies. In later years, he played bit parts in films like The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. He was in a ton of films, but oftentimes he went uncredited. Graustark was a fictitious kingdom, of course, presented in a series of books created by author George Barr McCutcheon, starting in 1901. These books were really popular, so much so, in fact, that McCutcheon helped spawn an entire subgenre of literature, often referred to as Graustarkian or Ruritanian romances. Ruritania being another romantic kingdom in The Prisoner of Zenda. In these stories, there was always romance and adventure, court intrigue, spies, and the threat of war taking place in these little pocket kingdoms. Of course, love always triumphed in the end. Several Graustark movies were made before this one, dating back to 1915, and Graustarkian-type romances have been put on film ever since. Even movies like The Mouse That Roared owes its existence to Graustark. So, about this here movie. Despite the cross-dressing angle, I can't see Twitter raving about this one, though. Marion pulls off the cross-dressing thing effectively, at least in some of the scenes. Like, she looks like a 14-year-old boy at times, but she's obviously a she at other times. This is, of course, a comedy, and we're in on the secret, so we know she's a she and not a he. Besides that, the Twitter kids wouldn't like this one on account of the fact that Marion is only cross-dressing temporarily, and only because she has to, and not because it's some fetish or identity issue she has. Plus, she wants to marry a prince and is happy to change back into a dress when the opportunity arises. So she's not just a weirdo. Anyway, I'm giving Beverly of Graustark 2 paws up. As comedies go, it's not really a knee slapper, but it's competently directed and even has a few inspired camera shots. The story is engaging, and while a comedy and a vehicle for Marion Davies, it's still a good example of Graustarkian or Ruritanian romance. And Marion Davies is great. The restoration on this here Blu-ray is excellent, and the movie boasts an early 2-strip Technicolor segment in its last reel. You take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.